Spooky tea, anyone? It's me again. I'm happy to say that my previous post has already started to help. In my inebriated state, I forgot to mention a very important detail that could save lives. The organization does not kill everything that is supernatural. We only kill those that want to harm humans. We have centers of operation all around the world, in which we train the ones that seek refuge to lead a life as close as possible to normal. Today, I want to tell you the story of my first hunt, in which I returned with fewer men than we first set out with. I was 20, and due to the nature of my line of work, I thought I was invincible. Being a hunter for 5 years already, I thought I'd seen it all. But God, how I was wrong. Me and 2 guys from the organization were to go on a hunt, which consisted of going after a lonely Wendigo that had set its hunting ground in the north of Minnesota in Pine Island State Forest. We got equipped accordingly, with silver and bronze bullets filled with holy water, ash, wood, and ricin, along with silver knives and around 20 silver boxes, in case there was more than one. We arrived at the place and set up camp, which consisted of our tents put in a circle, and a fire so big that it could be seen from space. The camp was impossible to enter for a Wendigo, so we all felt pretty relaxed, as it seemed this was going to be a fairly easy hunt. Besides the strength of the beast and its shrieks for help, it doesn't really have any other tactics. You see, Wendigos run on pure instinct, and that is why we purposely first let it know of our presence. That way it gets driven by hunger and is at its most vulnerable. The night was nice enough. A bit cold, but still okay. We had a bottle of Jack that we were passing around, and we were all smoking like chimneys. We shot a few normal rounds into the trees, so that we seemed to be just stupid and drunk hunters who were there for a moose. We didn't realize was that even though we did make enough noise to be heard by fucking aliens, we didn't see any green eyes in the forest. Nor did we hear any cries for help, which was rather worrying, as we could hear movement in the brush. In the morning, we were to scout the area around us, and draw the Anasi symbols around our camp, and so we did. But we saw something strange. The hunting grounds of an apex predator, such as a Wendigo, are often littered with the corpses of animals, and are very quiet. But the forest around us was brimming with life. The scouting is always done in pairs. But since we were 3, the senior hunter in our group, Mike, was alone. We were on radio comms at all time, so we never lost contact with him. But after a while, we heard a distressing noise. Mike screaming in pain for about 2 seconds, and then silence. That was the moment we realized that we were not after a Wendigo. They never hunt during the daytime, and don't kill so quickly either. A Wendigo eats its prey alive, and the torture lasts for at least half an hour. We ran to the location the GPS was showing us and found Mike. He looked normal. But as we got closer, he was the opposite of what a human being should look like. The once energetic, humorous and happy man was now like a blank sheet of paper. He had not a flicker of emotion in his eyes, and started to walk like he had no control over his own body. Aimless and erratic, his limbs moving in directions that couldn't be achieved by a contortionist. It was just freaky. When I asked that thing what it was doing, it turned its head slowly and said that it was mapping the ground. But the body was moving back the way Mike had already scanned. I would have shot it right then and there, but I realized something. It didn't know that we knew it wasn't Mike. So I told it calmly that we had finished scouting already and that we should head back to camp. The walk was rather tense, as you can imagine. I didn't take my eyes off the thing, and with every step, it seemed to get better at walking. More human-like. By the time we got back to the camp, the thing was walking better than the real Mike, who himself had a slight limp. I told the thing that me and Alex had to go to the car to take some more gear, and that we'd be back in about an hour. At first, it protested, but I convinced it that it needed to stay and look after the camp. During the hike back to the car, we constantly felt like we were being watched, as if something was just about to jump out the bush. Luckily, nothing did. But when we got back to the car, we realized that the gas tank was broken, and the fuel was all over the ground. I entered the car carefully with Alex and put the music to the highest volume. Before I managed to say anything, Alex said abruptly, "How do we kill it? It's not a Wendigo." After a moment of thinking, I replied, "I've got no fucking idea." After a long moment of staring at each other in silence, I looked down at the GPS to see how far from the closest town we were. But when I looked, I froze in horror. You see, when you work for the organization, they implant a small capsule containing a GPS locator under your skin, and at that moment, the GPS was showing Mike moving from the camp and towards us at an inhuman speed. I showed it to Alex, and he looked absolutely petrified. The marker suddenly stopped 50 meters away from us. We pretended as if nothing was going on and took some items from the car, then headed normally back towards camp, while glancing at the GPS every so often. Mike was following us, and when we were about 200 meters away from the camp, I saw him on the GPS move at an insane speed, almost as if he had teleported back inside his tent. What is this thing? That night was absolutely dreadful. Every time I was about to fall asleep, a shriek would rip through the air, jolting me fully awake. That was when I knew it was playing the long game. Exhaustion. It was waiting until I was too weak to defend myself. Then, and only then, would it feast. I hadn't planned on waiting till morning to go and fill it with bullets, but all of our guns, as expected, were missing, except for the tranquilizers. I went to Alex's tent to let him know what was happening, but his tent was empty. Then I heard from behind me Mike's voice. "He went for some wood," it said in a monotone manner. I decided to wait for Alex to return, in case I could save him, but deep down I knew I was the only one alive now. When Alex eventually came back, he was just like Mike when we found him. No personality, no energy, and walking in an odd jerky manner. I prepared myself mentally, took a deep breath and quickly shot them both with the tranq gun. They went down seizing almost instantly. After that, I started to run. And believe me, I ran as fast as I could, non-stop in the direction of the closest town that sat about 6 miles away. But after about 4 miles, I stopped to catch my breath and looked down at the GPS. It was then I saw both Mike and Alex running at an inhuman speed towards me. I ditched everything and anything I didn't need, keeping only my water bottle and the gun. Again, I began running at full speed, with my heart beating out of my chest. I was half a mile away from the town now, and then I heard it. High-pitched shrieks coming from behind me. About a quarter of a mile away, maybe less. I wasn't going to make it. There was only one thing to do now. stand my ground, turn and face these monstrosities head on. I steadied my hand and shot the last dart at Alex, then held my knife, pointing outwards from my chest. Luckily, the thing that took Alex collapsed to the ground from the dart. Smack! I felt the full force of Mike hitting my body. The monster impaling itself into my knife, feeling its face half an inch away from mine, still grinning with a sea of needle-like rotting teeth, as its eyes slowly went dim and body began to slump before hitting the floor with a large thud. I was alive. I was still alive. Walking over to the still seizing Alex, I plunged my knife into the creature's heart, over and over again, until it eventually stopped thrashing around. Finally now, it was over. When I got back into town, I immediately called the organization and told them what had happened, all the time while still keeping an eye on the GPS. For some reason, I was under the impression that Alex and Mike had moved, ever so slightly. But I guess it was just the exhaustion. Or at least, I hoped so. When the organization eventually arrived, we headed back out to find the bodies. But the only thing we found was skin, shriveled up and covered in some kind of slime. No sign of the creatures. Nothing. They were gone. Years later, I know now that these creatures are called flesh gates, and are a handful to deal with. If you are to ever run into one while hiking or camping, the best thing you can do is run or put yourself out of your own misery as quickly as possible. Trust me, it's better than the alternative. Sleep tight and don't let the bedbugs bite. I'll see you again soon, I hope.
Spooky tea, anyone?